My world was a quiet one, built on the foundations of my grandfather's wisdom. He had been a man of immense intellect and even greater caution, a chemical engineer who saw the world as a series of unstable reactions. His most profound lesson wasn't about formulas, but about value. Not the kind you find in a bank, but the kind you find in a person's character. He had taught me to live modestly, to value experience over extravagance, and to understand that money, when flaunted, was a beacon for the wrong kind of people. This philosophy, a silent inheritance more profound than any fortune, guided my life. I drove a 15-year-old Honda, lived in a small, comfortable apartment, and found joy in the simple things. Laurel was the beautiful, ambitious exception to my quiet rules. For 3 years, she had been a vibrant storm in my calm life. She was confident, with a laugh that could fill a room, and an ambition that bordered on relentless. I loved her, or so I thought, but there was a constant low-level discord between us. The subtle sneer when I suggested a quiet night in, the pointed comments about my apartment being too cozy, the way she'd casually mention the things her friends' boyfriends bought for them. I made excuses for her, telling myself she was just particular, that she wanted the best for us. Looking back, I should have seen the cracks long before the dam broke. The night it all fell apart was meant to be the beginning of everything. I had been planning to propose for months. The ring, my grandmother's, was not a diamond-encrusted testament to wealth, but a simple, elegant band that had belonged to my grandfather's first wife. It was a symbol of enduring love, a legacy of a life lived, a promise whispered across generations. I had made reservations at an upscale but not ostentatious restaurant, the kind of place where the ambiance spoke of quiet dignity, not loud money. We were halfway through our meal when I felt my palms grow slick with sweat. The moment was coming. The waiter brought the bill, and with a nervous flourish, I presented my card. The first attempt declined. My face flushed with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I tried another card, the one I used for all my everyday expenses. Declined again. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I knew I had funds. Sometimes banks froze cards for unusual activity, and a slightly more expensive dinner than my usual might have triggered a security alert. "I'm so sorry," I stammered to the waiter, my voice a whisper of humiliation. "There must be some mistake. Can you try again?" That's when Lurley laughed. It wasn't a sympathetic chuckle or a nervous titter. It was a cold, brittle sound, a shard of ice splintering in the quiet restaurant. "Of course your card got declined," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed dining room. "I can't believe I've been wasting my time with someone who can't even afford a decent dinner." My shock was a physical blow. I stared at her, unable to comprehend the cruelty in her eyes. "Lurl, it's just a banking error," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can call them right now." "No, Marcus, just no." She stood up, her movements sharp and final. "I'm done pretending this is going to work. I'm done pretending I can build a life with someone who shops at thrift stores and drives a 15-year-old Honda. I deserve better than this." And with that, she grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving me stranded with a bill I couldn't pay and a ring I would never give her. My best friend Theo came to my rescue, paying the bill without a word. The pity in his eyes was a heavier burden than the debt. The next few days were a fog of self-pity and confusion. I replayed the scene over and over, trying to find a mistake, a flaw, something I could have done differently. What I couldn't escape was the truth. My modest life, the one I had built on my grandfather's principles, was the very thing that had driven her away. The bitter irony was that I wasn't broke, not even close. I was, in fact, quietly, privately wealthy. 2 years ago, when my grandfather passed away, he left me a single letter. In it, he confessed his lifelong paranoia of banks and governments and revealed a secret life as an investor. He had been quietly stockpiling precious metals and rare collectibles, storing them in dozens of safety deposit boxes under various aliases across the country. The letter was a detailed map to a hidden fortune, a treasure hunt disguised as a series of instructions. I had only accessed one of the boxes, a small test to see if his story was true. What I found inside, rare coins, a vintage watch, a handful of gold bars, was more than I could have imagined. I kept the secret, kept living the same modest life, because I wanted to ensure that the woman I married would love me for who I was, not for what I had. Lurel's swift departure confirmed my greatest fear and proved my grandfather's wisdom. The test had failed, not because I was the wrong kind of man, but because she was the wrong kind of woman. A week after the restaurant incident, Theo arrived with news. He had seen Lurel, already with someone new. My stomach clenched as he told me about Preston, the man with the BMW and the finance job. A quick check of her social media confirmed it all. Photos of them at expensive restaurants, on lavish shopping trips, all posted with captions that twisted the knife in my heart. One caption in particular stung. "Finally found someone who knows how to treat a woman right. Sometimes you have to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince." A frog. She had called me a frog. The insult, so public and so cold, solidified something in me. The next morning, I was no longer the quiet man in the small apartment. I was the heir to my grandfather's legacy, a man with a plan. I spent the next 2 weeks traveling, opening box after box in cities I barely knew. Gold coins from the 1800s, silver bars, rare stamps, vintage watches. Each box was a silent testament to my grandfather's genius and my new reality. When I was finished, I had a conservative estimate of my worth. $2.7 million. I was done with modesty. I hired a private investigator, not out of spite, but out of a need to know. What I discovered was fascinating and damning. Preston was married with 2 young children, his wife living in another state. Lurel was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. And I was her punchline, the deadbeat she told everyone about. My revenge would not be quiet. I rented the rooftop of the city's most exclusive hotel. The invitation was simple, mysterious. "You're invited to celebrate a new chapter. Dress to impress." I knew she would come. Lurel could never resist a party, especially one that promised a life she thought she deserved. The night of the party, I stood on the rooftop, the city lights a glittering tapestry behind me. I wore a custom-tailored suit and my grandfather's vintage Rolex, a timepiece I had never worn before, a symbol of a life I had never allowed myself to live. Lurel arrived with Preston, a vision in a designer dress. I watched from across the room as her eyes scanned the lavish decorations, the champagne flutes, the live music. The confusion on her face was a small victory. When she finally saw me, her confusion morphed into shock, then a glimmer of fear. I walked over, 2 glasses of champagne in my hands. "Lurel, Preston, I'm so glad you could make it." Her voice was a strained whisper. "Marcus, what is this? How did you—" "How did I what?" I smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. "Afford this?" I handed her a glass. "That's an interesting question. I wanted to thank you, both of you. Lurel, you taught me something important that night at the restaurant. You showed me exactly who you are. And Preston—" I turned to him, my voice dropping. "I'm sure your wife, Patricia, would be interested to know how you've been spending your evenings." The color drained from his face. Lurel, oblivious to his terror, was only focused on me. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "I'm talking about the fact that you left me because you thought I was broke," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge of steel. "Because you thought I wasn't good enough. You never bothered to find out what I was actually worth." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo, a shot of one of my grandfather's open safety deposit boxes filled with gold coins. "This is just one of 37 boxes. Conservative estimate, $2.7 million. I was never broke, Lurel. I was just careful. I was testing to see if you would love me for who I was, not what I had. You failed that test, spectacularly." The room had fallen silent, all eyes on our little drama. I pulled out my grandmother's ring, the one she had called insignificant, the one I had planned to give her. I was going to propose to you that night. This ring represents real love, lasting love. But you walked away before I could even ask. Laurel's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus, I didn't know. If you had known, you would have stayed for the wrong reasons, I said, my voice softening with a finality that felt like a closing door. And that's exactly why I never told you. I left her standing there, a woman who had given up a king because she thought he was a frog. Preston was already backing away, a ghost in the crowd, no doubt terrified of the life he was about to lose. I never spoke to Laurel again. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to reach out, but some words, once said, cannot be taken back. Preston's wife, Patricia, found out about the affair. I may have sent her some photos from the party, along with a simple note. They are now getting a divorce. As for me, I'm still in the same apartment, still driving the same Honda. But I've started a foundation in my grandfather's name, dedicated to helping young people with financial struggles, a quiet homage to the man who taught me the true meaning of value. I eventually met someone. Her name is Iris, a teacher at the local elementary school. She drives a car even older than mine and lives in a small studio apartment. She loves me for my terrible jokes and my tendency to cry during movies. When I told her about my grandfather's inheritance, her eyes lit up, not with greed, but with a quiet, profound joy. That's wonderful, she said. Think of all the good you can do with that. That was the moment I knew. My declined credit card, that night of humiliation and betrayal, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It revealed the truth before it was too late. It showed me that money doesn't buy love, but it can certainly reveal who truly deserves it. And it can show you that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could have happened.